room fell silent the moment John Kennedy stepped onto the stage. Not the president, of course, but his namesake. A humble man, soft-spoken, with deep eyes that carried both the weight of history and the warmth of kindness. John Kennedy was a retired teacher, a lifelong mentor, and the guest speaker at the community's annual Voices of Hope event. Everyone had come expecting words. What they got was a moment that would ripple through their hearts forever. Among the audience sat Ellen Whitmore, 28 years old, in the second row. She sat with her hands folded tight in her lap, eyes slightly downcast. Most people didn't recognize her right away. She wasn't famous, not in the traditional sense, but in this small town in South Carolina, everyone knew the story. Ellen was the girl who had lost everything and somehow was still standing. 2 years earlier, a freak car accident had taken the lives of her parents and younger brother. One moment, she was heading home from college for spring break. The next, she was staring at 3 caskets. No one could find the words then. How could they? She was 26, bright, full of life, and in a single, cruel twist of fate, she was orphaned, alone, and haunted by the what-ifs that often poison the soul after tragedy. Since then, Ellen had barely spoken in public. She stopped attending church. She pulled away from her friends. But she had accepted the invitation to attend this event, almost by accident. A neighbor had left a flyer in her mailbox with a note that simply read, "Maybe this could help. Just come. No pressure." That neighbor would never know what she set into motion. Back on stage, John Kennedy spoke with a quiet sincerity that immediately drew everyone in. "I've always believed," he said, "that the heaviest burdens are carried by the quietest hearts." He paused. The audience leaned in. He wasn't reading from a script. He was speaking from memory, from life. "When I was a young man, I lost my sister to a fire. I blamed God. I blamed the world. I blamed myself, and for years I lived in silence, anger, and grief. But one day, an old woman I barely knew handed me something I didn't think I wanted, a Bible." He reached into his worn leather satchel and pulled it out slowly, like it was something sacred. The cover was faded, corners frayed. This very Bible. Whispers flooded across the audience. He wasn't being metaphorical. This was the actual book that had traveled through the hardest years of his life with him. He held it like a lifeline. "I didn't read it at first. I resented it, but one night, I opened it not because I believed, but because I was tired of hating." He turned the Bible in his hands and looked out into the crowd. "It saved my life. Not because it magically healed me, but because it reminded me that I wasn't alone. That pain wasn't the end of my story." Then, without breaking eye contact, he took a step forward down from the stage, walking slowly into the audience. The crowd parted like water. He walked directly to Ellen, and in front of everyone, he knelt. "Ellen," he said softly, but the microphone picked it up. "You don't know me, but I know pain, and I know what it means to live through it when it doesn't make sense." He held the Bible out to her. "This isn't about religion. This is about hope. This is about remembering that your story isn't finished yet. And I believe, with all my heart, that you were meant for more than grief." The room was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the overhead lights. Ellen didn't move at first. Her eyes welled with tears. Her hands trembled. She hadn't cried in public since the funeral, hadn't spoken a full sentence in front of more than 3 people in almost 2 years. But somehow, in this moment, surrounded by strangers who suddenly felt like family, something in her broke hand, something else, something softer, took its place. She reached out and accepted the Bible. Not just the book, but the moment. The gesture, the belief. Then she stood, and what she did next left the entire crowd stunned. She turned to face them and began to speak. Her voice cracked at first, barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to come here tonight. I've spent 2 years trying not to feel anything, because every time I do, it hurts." People leaned in. Some were already in tears. But sitting here, listening to this man talk about loss like it wasn't the end, it made me realize something, I'm still here. And maybe there's a reason for that. She looked down at the Bible in her hands. My mum used to read this to us when we were little. I used to think she was just trying to help us sleep, but maybe she was planting something in us. Seeds. For days like today. A few gasps and sniffles echoed through the room. Ellen smiled for the first time in what felt like years. I'm not healed. I'm not whole. But for the first time in a long time, I think I want to be. The room erupted into applause. Not the kind that comes from politeness or routine, but the kind that rises from souls being stirred. People stood, some hugged, some wept openly. John Kennedy remained kneeling, tears in his own eyes. He didn't need to say another word. His Bible had found its next owner, its next chapter. And Ellen had found her voice. Final message. Some gifts are more than objects. They're symbols of faith, of continuity, of second chances. And sometimes all it takes is one act of courage to awaken a whole community. Elon's story reminds us that grief may break us, but grace can rebuild us, and that healing often begins the moment we realize we don't have to carry it alone.